Confucius, and bright virtue as heaven, earth, spirit, God. Tien Cong Tran, Ph.D. Chapter 1. Bright virtue as heaven, earth, spirit, God. Confucius said in the Analects, I transmit and do not create. I believe in and love the ancients. I venture to compare myself with our old Peng. So the way that Confucius spoke of had been present from ancient times to his. That way was found in the Book of Change and the Book of Poetry. Confucius himself wrote the 10 wings for the Book of Change. The way is the domain in which all things appear. The domain indicates the sphere in which man resides in his relation to all things. So the task of thought is to look into that sphere to find out the way. Section 1. The Vision of Confucius. Confucius looks into that sphere and sees heaven, earth, spirit, and God. Why does he see heaven, earth, spirit, and God? Because he sees so. If we compare Confucius with many other philosophers, we will find out that the vision of Confucius is different from theirs. How are we able to explain the reason of this different vision? There are things which appear as material and there is the sphere in which this material appears. This fact is common for everyone. Material is what everyone sees. But the sphere, the domain of lightness, is what even philosophers do not see as the same. The researches of Husserl and Heidegger show that bright virtue, being, and material are two different realities, even though they appear at the same time in the same vision. The error of human thought lies in the fact that it thinks bright virtue from material. This error lies mainly in the fact it has the idea that bright virtue and material are one. But what is the purpose of brightening bright virtue? It is to renovate people so that they rest on the highest goodness. The final purpose is to find out the perfect goodness, because the perfect goodness brings resting for people. Resting is peaceful dwelling. The purpose of the great learning is to bring the peaceful dwelling for everyone. For Confucius, looking for the way is looking for the way that leads everyone to a peaceful dwelling, an individual as well as social peaceful dwelling. Section 2. Heaven and Earth. The Book of Change begins with the hexagrams heaven and earth. Heaven and earth are the domain in which things appear. The doctrine of the mean also talks about the way of heaven and earth. The way as peaceful dwelling is the way of heaven and earth, because heaven and earth show what is the peaceful dwelling. Earth with its fertility makes plants grow, it is the place for human habitation, and heaven with its rain and sunshine also helps plants to grow, brings coolness and warmness. Making plants grow, being human habitation and bringing coolness and warmness contribute to the founding of the peaceful dwelling. On earth there are people and animals who love one another, help one another, and on heaven there is God who grants graces. Loving one another, helping one another and granting graces contribute to the founding of the peaceful dwelling. Man seeks the way as peaceful dwelling. From where does man get the idea of a peaceful dwelling? From heaven and earth. Heaven and earth are the origination of the idea of a peaceful dwelling. Heaven and earth are the image of a peaceful dwelling. and the peaceful dwelling is the origination of the appearance of all things, including God. More correctly, the dwelling or the use is the origination of the appearance of all things. If the dwelling is not peaceful, a thing will happen as destroying a peaceful dwelling. A house or a chalice is a thing which constructs the peaceful dwelling, a bomb is a thing which destroys the peaceful dwelling. Even though he says that the way is not far from man or within man, Confucius seems also to have a different idea of heaven. 1. Heaven seems to be some individual. The master said, "There is no one who understands me." Tien asked, "How is it that there is no one who understands you?" The master said, "I do not complain against heaven, nor do I blame man. I study what is below and get through what is above. The only one who understands me is perhaps heaven." The master said, "He who offends against heaven has no God to whom he can pray." 2. Heaven seems to be some powerful individual. In the book of poetry it is said, "The radiant, joyable sovereign clearly displayed his excelling virtue. He adjusted his people, he adjusted man. He received blessings from heaven, he was protected by heaven, he was given the order, to govern all were arranged by heaven." Order or command or destiny, fate, is another name of heaven or the way, and it shows the power of heaven. 3. Order, command, or destiny, fate, often indicates heaven, but sometimes it seems to be different from heaven. Kung Po Liao slandered Zolu to Chi Sunday Zafu Qingpo reported it, saying, "My master is certainly led astray by Kung Po Liao, but I have enough power to have his corpse exposed in the marketplace or at the court." The master said, that the way prevails resides in destiny, that the way fails also resides in destiny. What can Kung Po Liao do in defiance to destiny? Section 3, Spirit and God. The doctrine of the mean says, "How abundant is the virtue of spirit and God. We look for them, but we do not see them, we listen to them, but we do not hear them, yet they enter into all things, and there is nothing without them." Spirit God is the essence of all things. Besides heaven earth, Spirit God belongs also to the sphere in which things appear. Besides heaven and earth, the Book of Change also talks about God's spirits. God or the ruler of heaven is the image of goodness, the holy. God grants graces. Goodness and graces contribute to the peaceful dwelling. Spirits denote human souls after death. Spirits can be ghosts, however they can be good ghosts. Spirits remind men of their death. Living under the shadow of death also contributes to the peaceful dwelling. The authors of the Book of Change have the attunement of heaven earth God's spirits as the dimension of the peaceful dwelling. Heaven plays the dominant role. God is divine. The divine is the image of a holy sphere in which man dwells. God understood as the divine or the creator outside man is a derivative concept. The very holy to which man always relates is the original divine. As we will say later, the way is not outside man. The original divine is not outside man. the divine or God outside man is only an image originating from the original divine. But the divine outside man is an easier concept for man. In religions we find both concepts of the divine. The divine or God outside man is an evident concept. In Hinduism there are many gods: Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. In Buddhism there are a great number of Buddhas. In Christianity there is God the Lord. But there is also the divine within man. In Hinduism there is the Atman. In Buddhism there is Buddhahood. In Christianity there is the Spirit. The Atman, Buddhahood, and the Spirit are present within man. If the way is not far from man, God in the way of Confucius is the divine within man. But right in the Confucius thought God is also spoken of as the divine outside man. The doctrine of the mean says, they, spirit and God or spirits and gods, cause all the people in the kingdom to fast and purify themselves in their richest dresses, in order to attend at their sacrifices. The Analects says, when offering sacrifices to spirits, he felt as if they were present; when offering sacrifices to gods, he felt as if they were present. The doctrine of the mean cites the words of the Book of Poetry: when gods come, we are not able to know, how can we heedless? Through all has been said, we see that religions accept, besides the divine outside man, the divine within man. Spirits are seldom spoken of alone. The lower great commentary in the Book of Change says, the places of heaven and earth having been determined, the sages completed their ability to make or read the Book of Change. Thus people can participate in the calculation of men and spirits. Spirits is often written together with gods, spirits and gods. So spirits indicate a kind of gods. A spirit also indicates a soul that left the body of a person. A soul or spirit belongs to the divine domain. To sacrifice to spirits is to sacrifice to souls that have flown up into the divine sphere. Therefore, in a complete manner, heaven, earth, spirit, God is the essence of all things. For example, we see that thing as a chalice. It is a chalice because it contains wine from earth; wine is offered to heaven, so man as a mortal animal or man's soul is linked to the everlasting divine. That is the reason why we can say that a thing appears as a chalice, because it appears in the sphere of heaven, earth, spirit, God. This is not reasoning, this is the description of a truth. Confucius related the way that had been present in the Chinese thought before him. In order to see a thing as a chalice, we have to let heaven, earth, spirit, God appear in that thing. So in a thing as a chalice there are two different realities, material or crystal and the way or heaven, earth, spirit, God. Section 4. What is heaven, earth, spirit, God? When we speak of heaven, we think about the sky, blue and clear, about cloud, wind, thunder, lightning, very high above there, very far away. Is that heaven that Confucius wants to speak of? When we speak of earth, we think about the earth, land, river, mountain, lake, sea, far away to the horizon. Is that earth that Confucius wants to speak of? When we speak of God, we think about certain gods, the Creator, living at a certain divine sphere. Is that God that Confucius wants to speak of? When we speak of spirit, we think about souls, wandering in a certain domain around here. Is that spirit that Confucius wants to speak of? As we will present later, the way is not something as a thing or an object outside man or subject. Therefore heaven earth spirit God understood as above may not be the way Confucius wants to speak of. May here means, it is so, but it is not truly so. Heaven earth spirit God understood as above does not lie outside the way Confucius wants to speak of. By what can we say so? Because those are symbols or images of the way. Heaven is a symbol or image of the way. This is also true of earth, spirit, or God. The way is not a thing or object outside man. The way is formless or metaphysical. But it appears to man in a certain symbol or image. When we speak of a symbol or image, we think about a certain form. Therefore the metaphysical or the formless appears in a certain form. But this form is not so distinct as the form of a thing. In other words, compared to a thing, the way can be said to be formless. So it seems that words cannot express the idea. Heaven earth spirit God appears as a vague domain. Vague, but it is real. Without this vague, all things cannot appear. For example, things are considered noble or mean. By what is there something noble or mean? The upper great commentary in the Book of Change says, the heaven is high, the earth is low. The high and low are to set out, thus the noble and the mean have their places. So things appear as noble and mean because they appear in the sphere of the high heaven and the low earth. Man does not create the sphere. Because man lives in the sphere of the high heaven and the low earth, things appear as noble and mean. Also in the sphere of the high heaven and the low earth, affairs are arranged according to their kinds, things are divided according to their classes, thus there are the good and the bad. Section 5. A summary. Let us try to take some notes. 1. Confucius sees a reality that is different from material. 2. This reality is named, according to Chinese tradition, the way. 3. The way makes a thing appear. In other words, the way is the domain in which a thing or material, wood or crystal, appears as a thing, bridge or chalice. 4. Confucius sees the way as heaven earth spirit God. 5. Confucius' view of the way is not yet clear and complete. The way is a domain that is still open for future thought. Chapter 2. The characteristics of the way. As heaven earth spirit God. Confucius sees the way, the sphere in which all things appear, or heaven earth spirit God, or, shortly, heaven earth. Heaven and earth are two most distinguished symbols or images of the way. The task of Confucius is to describe the way or heaven and earth. To describe heaven and earth is to describe heaven and earth as they appear in things and as they make things appear. Confucius does not see heaven and earth purely, or, in other words, without their relation to things. He sees heaven and earth only in things. Suppose that heaven and earth were God, he would not see God before the creation of all things. He sees God only in the universe. Therefore heaven and earth are seen in their relation to all things. In their relation to all things means in all things and in making all things appear. How do heaven and earth appear in things and in making things appear? 1. Change. Completely speaking, the way is heaven, earth, spirit, God. However, it does not always appear so completely. In other words, it does not always appear as the same. It appears differently in this thing and in that thing. For example, this thing appears as a house. It is a house because it is under the heaven with rain, sunshine, wind, storm, thunder, lightning, coldness, and heat, because it occupies a secure ground in an immense land reaching to the remote horizon. Here heaven earth is the sphere of the appearance of the house. That thing appears as a chalice. It is a chalice because it contains wine which mortal man on the earth makes and offers to eternal God in the heaven. Mortal man wants, through the chalice, to reach to eternal God. Here heaven earth spirit God is the sphere of the appearance of the chalice. That thing appears as a stone. It is a stone because it is hard material standing against rain and sunshine. Here earth, and heaven, is the sphere of the appearance of the stone. In the same thing the way can appear differently. For example, a house is a temporary dwelling of fragile man on the earth in comparison to infinitely strong God in the heaven. Here heaven earth spirit God is the sphere of the appearance of the house. So the image in which the way appears changes according to man's response to the voice of the way. The way appears differently at each moment. That is the change of the way. The Book of Change tells about the change of the way. Since the way always changes, change is used as a name of the way and as the name of the book about the way. In the Book of Change the way is change, and this change is expressed in 64 images or hexagrams. Sometimes heaven God is much and earth spirit is little, sometimes heaven God is little and earth spirit is much, and sometimes they are equal. In a chalice the way appears more as heaven God. A chalice reminds us of God in heaven. In a house the way appears more as earth spirit. A house reminds us of mortal man's dwelling on earth. 2. Origin. Confucius sees only if there is heaven earth, there is a thing. It is possible to say that this is the first characteristic of the way. Only if there is heaven earth, there is a thing means that heaven earth is the origin of a thing. The Book of Change begins to speak of heaven and earth by enumerating the characteristic originating. The hexagram heaven begins with heaven, originating, prospering, beneficial, firming. The hexagram earth begins with earth, originating, prospering, beneficial, a mare's firming. To express the characteristics origin, the word giving birth is often used. Origin and giving birth often lead to unusual explanation that origin and giving birth are understood on the plan of material. Giving birth is like in a mother gives birth to a child, like in heaven and earth have a certain number of elements and powers to make things. All things in their innermost bosom are made of the two ethers yang and yin. This explanation is very popular, if not traditional. It is suitable to the common view of people. Confucius looks for what materially makes things and he finds heaven earth. There is nothing outside heaven earth. So it is heaven earth that makes all, material, things. But Confucius does not look for the material origin of things. He looks for the origin of the appearance of things. He sees that things appear in heaven earth and he says that heaven earth is the origin of the appearance of things. If there is no appearance of heaven earth, there are no appearance of things. As we will say later, benevolence is virtue that makes man appear as man. Benevolence is the sphere in which man appears as man. Briefly speaking, benevolence is the origin of man. Benevolence cannot be understood as the material origin of the making of the body of man. It is the same of heaven, earth and things. Heaven earth gives birth to a chalice, but heaven earth does not give birth to crystal. The way is the way or manner, and the way or manner cannot not give birth to material. The way is a reality that is different from material and therefore it cannot give birth to material. 3. Universal, immense, vast, boundless. The way seems to be one and things are many, up to infinite. But anything that appears needs the way. So the way embraces all things. So the way is considered universal, immense, vast, boundless. Even God, the Creator, needs the way to appear to man. The way is the manner in which man relates to things. Without the way things may be there, but how they are there, we do not know. When they are there to man, when they appear to man, they have to appear in the way. Without the way, there are no things in the point of view of their relation to man. Thus if the superior man speaks of the greatness of the way, nothing in the world is found able to embrace it. The way lightens all under heaven and on earth. It is said in the book of poetry, the hawk flies up to heaven, the fishes leap in the deep. This expresses that the way appears above as well as below. The way of the superior man may be found, in its beginning, in the relation between husband and wife, but in its utmost reaches, it shines brightly through heaven and earth. The Analects says, the Master said, well, Tsan, my way is one but pervades all. Yes. The Master said, see do you think I am the kind of man who learns many things and keeps them all in memory? Yes, is it not so? The Master said, no, I use the one and know all. In Western philosophy it is often said that there are many beings and there is only one being. Being is one and common to all beings. The doctrine of the mean writes, large and thick, this is how it the way contains all things. High and noble, this is how it overspreads all things. Reaching far and continuing long, this is how it perfects all things. Large and thick, it is co-equal to earth. High and noble, it is co-equal to heaven. Reaching far and continuing long, it is infinite. Such being in its nature, without any display it is bright, without any movement it changes, without doing it completes its task. 4. Subtle, minute. That the way embraces all things means that anything, even extremely minute, needs the way. The way does not make a difference between a big thing and a small thing. Anything, even extremely minute, needs, so that it can appear, the way. Therefore even in minute things is found the way. Confucius says the way is minute. To speak of the way in its minuteness, nothing in the world would be found able to split it. There is nothing more visible than what is secret, and nothing more manifest than what is minute. The upper great commentary says, if it the change, the way does not contain something most subtle in the whole world, how could it do this? 5. Secret, hidden. The way appears so that things can appear. But the way hides itself, daily people see only things. That is the secrecy, hiddenness of the way. The way can be called a mystery, an abyss. Abyss wants to indicate that the way is so mysterious that we are never able to attain to a full knowledge of it. The doctrine of the mean says, the way of the superior man reaches wide and far, and yet is secret, yet in its utmost reaches, there is what even the sage does not know. The way was so secret that Confucius did not know how to teach it to people. In ancient times, the sages saw the way and, seeing the way was too difficult for people to understand, often tried to make people follow the way and did not attentively teach them to understand it. The Analects says, the people can be made to follow it the way, but cannot be made to understand it. 6. Visible, bright. Even hidden, the way always appears. Without the appearance of the way, there is no appearance of things. Because things always appear, the way also always appears. Heidegger says that a comprehension of being the way in man is a fact. That is why it is able to say that the way is visible and clear. The way is bright. Bright indicates that the way is the domain of brightness in which things appear. We have the expression, to brighten bright virtue. Man embraces in himself bright virtue. Regarding its nature, virtue is bright virtue. In daily life this bright virtue is hidden, therefore we need to brighten it. The way is hidden, but somehow it always appears, it is always visible, it is always bright. The doctrine of the mean says, common men and women, however ignorant, may intermeddle with the knowledge of it. Common men and women, however much below the ordinary standard of character, can carry into practice a part of it. Or, as just quoted above, there is nothing more visible than what is secret, and nothing more manifest than what is minute. 7. Wonderful, divine. We daily see things. What is different from common things is considered strange. The way is different from things. Therefore the way is considered strange. What is secret, sometimes manifest sometimes hidden, and strange is called wonderful. Therefore the way is considered wonderful. We have said that one aspect of the way is God. So the way is considered divine. The upper great commentary says, the unfathomable in the yang and the yin is called God. Or, as just quoted above, if it the change, the way does not contain something most subtle in the whole world. How could it do this? To men, the way seems to be wonderful and divine. Wonderful and divine indicates different from and above ordinary things. 8. Formless, soundless. The way is, being different from things, formless and soundless. The doctrine of the mean says, how abundant is the virtue of spirit and God. We look for them, but we do not see them, we listen to them, but we do not hear them, yet they enter into all things, and there is nothing without them. They cause all the people in the kingdom to fast and purify themselves, and array themselves in their richest dresses, in order to attend at their sacrifices. Then, like overflowing water, they seem to be over the heads, and on the right and left. This can be called the metaphysical or abstract of the way. Through the above-mentioned characteristics of the way, we see that the way is not something that we can grasp. If we are asked what the way is, we will be perplexed when we want to answer the question. But not only we, great thinkers of mankind themselves have also been perplexed. We can say that what mankind has talked about the way is not complete. The way is a domain that is widely open to future thought.